Welcome back to the Cat's Tail. When I did this poll last week, people said they wanted to see my games from the 3.8 majors, whether they went well or not. Also, since I usually show games I win in my guides, some people have been asking for me to review some games where I lose too. So, hopefully this will make both groups happy. The format for the majors requires you to bring 3 decks and your opponent gets to ban 1. You then play a best of 3, where you need to win once with each deck you brought. I was expecting some of the top played decks in EU to be Bin, Monkley, Raiden Superconduct and Nihida Electrocharged. Bin in particular was a meta-defining deck in 3.8, which most players would be bringing and either planning to ban or to counter. As well as my RXN deck, which is my most practiced deck, I brought 2 other meta decks that I had a very good win record with in testing, with a few small tweaks I made to the deck list to improve certain matchups. These were Bin, which I think is just too strong to justify not bringing, and provides a good counter to Monkley, and Agent Electrocharged, which is a popular deck in Asia that I enjoyed the playstyle of, and which other EU players might be a little unfamiliar with. I had a general plan that if I banned Raiden Superconduct or another Shunher deck, and I learnt how to play the Bin mirror, then I should have a set of strong decks with at least decent matchups against the other most popular decks. Plus, if my Bin was likely to get banned, then I'll still have 2 other well-rounded decks left over, including RXN to counter my opponent's Bin. When it came to it, my opponent in the first round was Kirano, who brought the control deck Bin, the combo deck Ayamiya, and a fairly unique control deck, Geokenki. I banned the Geokenki deck because I felt it would be good against my lineup, especially because I had chosen to play few copies of Send-Off in my decks, since I was planning on banning the most common deck Send-Off is good against. My opponent banned my RXN deck, which was both my most practiced deck and my best deck against their field. So I ended up needing to win with both Bin and Agent EC against my opponent's Bin and Ayamiya, which means I risked running into some pretty challenging matchups. Let's see how it goes. Okay, so game 1 here, and we're already facing a slightly challenging matchup. So this is a classic example of a control deck versus a combo deck. We're playing as Bin, and our opponent's playing as Ayamiya, so their game plan involves them using Yoimiya's Elemental Burst, and then this adds 1 pyro damage to every skill of their other characters. So if they're dealing cryo damage with Chongyun or Ayaka, then it's dealing plus 3 extra damage on every skill. And as a control deck, that's a really big power spike that can be quite hard to survive through. So the way I see it, I think we have basically 2 strategies of winning in a game like this. We either need to pressure Yoimiya before Yoimiya can use her burst, and if they can't use Yoimiya burst or Yoimiya dies before using the burst, then it's going to be very hard for them to win, and that puts us in a big advantage. On the other hand, if they do use the burst, then if we can survive until that burst runs out, it lasts a duration of 2 rounds. If you can survive until it runs out, then that's another way we could win this game. But it's going to be tough, and especially since we're not expecting our opponent to make any mistakes at this level, we will need some fortune to have a chance in this game too. So we're going to start on Ito. Because I've drawn the bell in my opening hand, give my Ito extra damage, I'm going to try for the plan of pressuring Yoimiya before Yoimiya can use her burst. My original dice are, well, they'd let me use Barbara skills, but that wouldn't help with my game plan, so I do reroll, hoping to get some good dice, and I do get some nice dice for my first turn. Not perfect, but pretty good. So opponent starts off just using a normal attack on Yoimiya. This is going to be important, we'll see in a moment. I equip my bell onto Ito to start ramping up the damage, and I am going to use Ito's skill here to start getting some stacks of Superlative Super Strength out, which could buff up my normal attacks. I'm planning that if opponent hits me again, which is something they might want to do to keep charging up energy on their Yoimiya, then I would have the 2 dice I would need and the 2 super strength stats I would need to just use a normal attack and get another 4 damage in on Yoimiya, which would be pretty good. However, opponent, this situation just uses their skill. So by doing normal attack first and then skill in that order, they actually deny me that super strength stack at this point, and now I have to make a slightly different play. Now, some of the cards in my hand are going to be useful, like Hash Brown is alright for maybe staying alive, but I would like to draw maybe something like a Heavy Strike to keep pressuring Yoimiya, and I still don't have the Tenacity of the Millilith equipment for Itto, which would be essential if I'm playing for a longer game especially, and it's just a very important card to draw in this deck. So in order to keep cycling through my deck, I'm effectively going to trade these 3 cards to draw 4 cards, because otherwise I don't really think I'm ever having a chance to play the Liyue Harbour Wharf, and I've got no other use for these dice. So I'll tune these 2 cards so I can play the Liyue Harbour Wharf, because as I say, I don't think otherwise I'm having enough time to play that before the end of the game. Opponent's going to use a Smoked Chicken to get the dice reduction, get the dice they need to do a normal attack there, and then put 2 dice into Liben. And we do want to end on Itto so that we can immediately start dealing damage next turn as well, to keep ramping up as much damage as possible on Yoimiya. So I do have a choice here of this first point in this round. I just want Geodice basically, and I'm rolling for those, and I do get pretty nice dice rolls here, so that's going well for me so far. If I just used a skill here on Itto, then since I don't actually have Heavy Strike in hand, I wouldn't actually have a way to take out Yoimiya before burst, although they might have to respect me having a Heavy Strike and play around it. I wouldn't actually be able to do that even if it came to it, even if my opponent took the risk. So I'm going to choose just to do a normal attack here, which sets Yoimiya into lethal range if they don't have any defensive cards. And I know in that deck there's no hash browns or other food apart from 2 Lotus Flower Crisp, and I think it's a reasonable risk to take to hope the opponent hasn't drawn a Lotus Flower Crisp in their mulligan or the top 7 cards of their deck, since there are only 23 cards into their, well, there's still 23 cards left in the deck so far. However, unfortunately for me, opponent does have the Lotus Flower Crisp here, which does derail my plans of defeating Yoimiya before burst. So yeah, there's no way now, full stop, for me to take Yoimiya out before Yoimiya can use a burst. So I have to go to my backup game plan. I have to try to survive until Yoimiya's burst is over. And I have at least pressured Yoimiya enough that they will have to use Yoimiya's burst before ending their turn here. So it's only until round 3, the end of round 3, that I will need to survive to, and hopefully make sure I'm not too far behind at that point. So I'm going to swap to Barbara here. If opponent's using their burst, I can get some decent value out of Barbara's skill, get some healing, stall out the game a bit, keep my party a bit higher on health. And opponent ends the turn here with the 1 die they need nicely to put into their Liben. So it's going quite well for our opponent too. And we're not in a great position here. So here I could just play the 2 pieces on my 2 characters, start healing them up. I do decide in the end that even if I'm going to survive next round, I do also need some advantage going into the late game. So I do feel like I need to develop the Tenshikaku here. So I will use the Geodai to develop that and use 1 piece on Itto to get Itto out of easy kill range. Because against that deck, well, we can see now opponent's got their Yoimiya burst out. That's plus 3 damage on every cryo skill effectively, which means that Chongyun or Ayaka's elemental skill is dealing 6 damage total, 3 plus 3, and normal attack if infused with cryo would deal 5. So getting up to 8 is, a decent place to be. 7 is really the key breakpoint I want my characters to be at, because above that they're then forced to need a card like Cryo Resonance in order to take them out in 1 hit. So with that said, I don't really want to spend my dice on anything on Barbara. I don't really want to risk Itto too much, and I do want to try to deny my opponent getting value out of a card like Gambler's Earrings if they have it, by staying on a character with a lot of health. And Noel also has a skill here that could help my character survive this turn, so I'm going to swap here to Noel. Now opponent, as you might have expected, uses the skill on Chongyun. This gives them now the option to either use the skill again or use a normal attack, depending on how much damage they need to deal. Whether they need to be dealing 6 damage or 5 damage, and therefore helps them make some good breakpoints. And I'm in a slightly tough position. If I just use Noel's elemental skill here, then Noel's going up to effectively 6, and then Noel can just die to this elemental skill. Opponent's just drawn quite a few cards. They've drawn 13 out of their 30 cards from their deck. And, you know, it's quite likely that they have cards like Gambler's Earrings, Cryo Resonance for +2 damage, and other cards that give them extra dice like Minty Meat Rolls, Legend of Vanessa, Parametric Transformer, all of which are cards in their list. So, if a opponent has the perfect cards they need, there's no way for me to win from this position. I'm not in a great position here, not in a great matchup, so I have to take some sort of risks. And in this situation, looking at the breakpoints of my characters, I do have some cards here to manipulate the breakpoints a little bit to make my characters a bit harder to kill. But if a opponent has Cryo Resonance in their hand, it really makes it much easier for them to hit the breakpoints. And I don't actually think if my opponent has Cryo Resonance and Gambler's Earrings that there's any way to play these cards that wins the game from here. So I decided to take the risk and, you know, try to win a game in which my opponent doesn't have Cryo Resonance in hand. And then if I put Noel up at 7 health, then Noel's then in theory out of range of being killed. And I can do this because I want to maybe save these for protecting my other characters. If I equip the bell to Noel and just use Noel's skill, Noel is now at effective 7. So again, I'm taking a risk here, but I need to take a risk to win. Opponent has Legend of Vanessa for more dice, Minty Meat Rolls for reduction, Gambler's Earrings, which could give them up to +3 extra dice this turn, 4 from killing my characters and 1 that's playing it. And crucially, they did have the Cryo Resonance there, which lets them take out Noel just with a normal attack, which is pretty disastrous for me. So it's not that I didn't expect this, but I had to take some sort of risk also. That's the decision I made. So from this point, I think this game is basically unwinnable, but I will play out my cards best I can. Lotus on Barbara, Pizza on Ito, because Ito's probably going to survive this round, pass the turn. Maybe I could have followed the Covenant into the Vanarana here, would have been decent. Maybe playing these foods differently would have been decent too. But this is what I go with. With the Covenant of Rock, they can take out Barbara too, even past the Lotus Flower Crisp. It ends up being quite good breakpoints for them. And deal some damage to Ito. So yeah, okay, we've got to the end of turn 3. We're not literally dead. We do get the Barbara here and the Cleanser on Ito, but they've got the full energy on their Chongyun. I don't really have relevant cards in my hand even at this point. And I think even with the best cards in hand, I mean, fine, we still haven't got the tenacity of the Millilith for one thing. There we go, we draw it finally here. But no, way too slow at this point. And I mean, while I'm technically out of range here, at a total of 8, the second Cryo Resonance makes this a very quick end to the game. So a tough matchup. Maybe 1 or 2 places I could play differently, but realistically, I don't think I was winning that game. So for game 2, I bring my Bin again. I have to win with both Bin and Agent EC against my opponent's Bin now, so I decide just to play the Mirror first. And we're looking for some of our key cards, like the Bell and Tenacity of the Millilith in particular, because this matchup is really all about getting as much value as you can. It's a long, slow control matchup. Probably take many rounds, unless someone makes a big mistake. And The way you get most value is by putting equipment on your Itto and then getting value out of that every single turn. Cards like Tenshikaku can also help. These are some nice draws, even though our starting hand wasn't amazing, because now I can start this game off by equipping the bell onto my Itto and immediately getting some damage in on my opponents. So my opponent's going to develop his Tenacity of the Millilith here, along with a few cards to help him draw cards. So that will provide some card advantage over this game, give him more options. We haven't drawn, unfortunately, our own. You have Wolf or Liban, and this also allows opponent to pass their turn without attacking, so I don't get full value out of my elemental skill. But still, I've charged up some energy on my Itto, and charging up energy on the Itto is very important, so that you can get to Itto's burst and start getting value out of the normal attacks and superlative super strength stacks even more. Now, second round we also rolled here just for Geodice basically, and we get 0. So that's going to limit our options on this turn a lot. So we're not going to really be able to use any of our Itto's skills. I don't want to pass turn immediately because my opponent then has complete information about what's up, so I'm going to swap stall a little bit. But my plan always this turn has to be, I can put 2 more dice into this Liban, that's fine. I can spend 4 dice on these 2 Senshikakus. So once I'm down at 6 dice, I'm just going to play my 10 Shikakus and pass. And I'm ending on Noel, since I don't really care if Noel takes damage. This matchup is all about getting as much value from Itto, so you want to keep Itto at high health to draw and find those cards which you can equip to Itto to get even more value when Itto uses his skills. And then you want to make sure he can burst and attack without being in too much danger. So at the start of our round 3 here now, we're just looking for Geodice again really. Yeah, a couple, so not great, but fine. But we do get our Liban and our 2 Tenshikakus to activate, which gives us a lot more useful dice. So this is a really critical moment in this game. Again, it's about getting as much damage in on their Itto while saving as much damage to our Itto. They've got Tenacity of the Millilith equipped, but no Bell. We've got the Bell, but no Tenacity of the Millilith. Either way, I want to be using my skills in Itto as much as possible. And getting the first attack with my Itto on their Itto is very valuable. So I'm going to use my Leave It To Me here to quick swap to Itto and immediately just use Itto's skill. So opponent pretty much is forced to attack into my Itto, attack into this skill this turn because they really want to charge up their own stacks and energy on their own Itto. So I should be able to get some decent value. So there we go. And now I'm also getting the next attack in here. And with the help of this heavy strike, I can actually put quite serious pressure on their Itto and reduce them to a very important breakpoint of 2 health. And that's relevant because now even with a Lotus Flower Crisp, they're in danger of being taken out by any 5 damage hit, which includes the Elemental Burst and includes the normal attack after I use my own burst. So this is quite a nice position to be in from my position. We've got a lot of damage on their Itto and our Itto is on a good health total, and they're forced to swap off and swap all a bit to make sure they can maybe at the end of the turn they're hoping to go back to Itto and get back up to full energy. But in our position we can also just swap all a bit here, go to Noel, it swaps to Zhongli, I can swap again, and this is I think my first really critical mistake this game. Swapping back to Itto here makes no sense when I could just swap to Barbara. If they swap back to their own Itto, then I can swap to my Itto. But I'm perfectly happy just swapping until we're both out of dice here, because my Itto is already on full health and full energy, and they're the one who's under pressure to actually use their Itto. So I can just swap back to Barbara here, and then if they swap to Itto, then I can swap to my Itto, and still have enough dice to burst, and even maybe use a normal attack afterwards. I kind of neglect the fact, apart from anything else, that they could actually use their Zhongli to deal damage to my Itto, which is exactly what happens here. So with the help of a heavy strike, they're able to get some good damage in on my Itto. And again, with 4 dice here, my moves are really awkward. I can't burst and use a normal attack, since I don't have another Geodai in my hand. I can't play this unless I've got 0 elemental dice left. So it's maybe best just to swap back off to Barbara here, or swap back to Noelle. But then I don't... Yeah, swapping Noelle will be better because then I still at least put some pressure on Ito, deal 2 damage. But again, opponent can just end the turn on Zhongli and store up all their dice in the Vanaranas, and then what am I going to do with my next turn? I kind of have to swap back to Ito again, and then burst, and opponent could just maybe sacrifice one of their other characters. Will still be okay, and I think it would still be better than doing what I did here, which is to burst on their Zhongli, which is a bit awkward because now I've only got the next turn to get damage out of and value out of my burst here. It lasts for 2 rounds, but I'm using it at the end of a round, so I don't get any more value out of it this round. It's only basically working for 1 round. So I think that's a bit of a mistake. They can even heal up their Ito a bit, which makes sense. And I'm ending here on my Ito without really a clear play for next turn, other than, well, I can start attacking with my burst, I guess. But I won't be hitting their Ito, which is the target I really want to hit. So big mistake, basically last turn swapping to Ito instead of Barbara. Now on this turn, opponent starts off, again they can use their Zhongli, maybe get a bit more damage in on my own Ito. And they also get a big shield out of this. Now, not the worst thing in the world for me because that uses 5 of opponent's dice, but there is more damage in my Ito, which isn't great. And they do have 5 points of shield. Now I do need to get rid of that shield because otherwise it carries over to the next character when they swap. And that would put their Ito in very safe position out of range of really any sort of threat. But for some reason, instead of using the normal attack here, and maybe using a Lotus in case I'm worried about Ito taking more damage, I just swap off. And this means they can save this big shield for when they eventually feel they're safe to swap back to Ito. I feel forced to swap back to Ito at this point because Ito's burst is still up and I really do need to get some value out of that and not just waste it. Plus I want to build up energy on Ito again for his next burst. But in the end I ended up using Ito's burst in a position where I wasn't really safe to keep using it, which was a big mistake. So okay, I can do an attack here and I'm not in danger of Ito dying immediately. But it's not really great for me because they've still probably got more defensive cards in their hand. Remember, they've got a lot of cards drawn. They've only got 11 cards left in their decks. They've drawn 19 of their 30 cards. They almost certainly have heavy strikes, woven dice, come to rock from their opening hand, haven't lost yet, and whichever other tools they need as well. So I'm not realistically threatening their Ito here very much. I can still... yeah, and there is a Lotus Flower Crisp there into a normal attack. Now at this point, again, I still want to get value out of my Ito if I'm safe to do so. And I do a few calculations in terms of how much damage they can do. But in terms of their normal attack, in terms of their dice here, and I take a bit of a risk here without really thinking that their burst just deals 5 damage. So even without the second heavy strike, they can just burst at this point and my Ito's in range. So this is another huge mistake. I'm doing this because I don't think their normal attack can kill me, and I think I'm desperate enough here that I have to risk them not having the second heavy strike. But actually they just only need a woven Geodai and they haven't used any this game. In addition to that comes into rock, and then they can just burst and kill my Ito here. So I did make a few big mistakes this game. To sum it up, I used Ito's burst and exposed him to more damage than need be, so I couldn't really get any value out of that burst after using it. And then I ended up at the end there making a big mistake letting him die to the breakpoints. And then at this point the game's pretty much over, because the Ito is equipped with Dynasty. I don't have any equipment on either of my other characters. My other characters are not going to be able to stand up to, an Ito after using the burst with Dynasty of the Millilith, with a bit of healing still going, and with 2 other characters in the wings anyway. Even if I could take out Ito, it's pretty much over. So I play out the rest of the game, just doing my best, of course. Still can use Noella's backup plan maybe by putting equipment on Noelle, but I'm just too far behind really at this point.
We can do this.
Maybe if the game went long enough, 2 Tenshikakus and 2 Dynasties on the Milliliths could get enough value, but yeah, that's not happening. And the last few rounds here just go to demonstrate how important Ito is to this deck and this matchup in particular. Sure, in other matchups, maybe like Barbara Skills, Barbara Burst will get you there, but against another control deck, you really just need the most value you can get, and that value comes from Ito's Burst into a long sequence of normal attacks, usually pumping out massive damage. I'll probably fast forward through the last bit here, because the game's pretty much over.
They still need me.
In the end, my opponent honestly just played better than me, and my matchups weren't great, so it's not a massive surprise that I lost. I find my brain turns to mush in these high pressure situations sometimes. Kirano ended up winning the #1 spot in the 3.8 Majors overall, and funnily enough the deck I banned actually went undefeated in the tournament. If I'm sad about anything, it's that I never got to play with either my Agent EC or my RXN deck in the Majors. Even though I lost both games, I still hope that people who ask me to upload these matches still find them useful as games to learn from, at least perhaps as a guide of what not to do.